Hi everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast. We look back at the previous week and tackle the things we thought were interesting. Nailed it. I'm Tom Rennie. Alongside me for today's programme is star of television, and we can all agree he's eating the cats and the dogs. It's Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hi Dunny, you all right?
You know, I got to go on a bit of a diet. When you stand next to Kyle Martino, Sarah Walsh, and DeMarcus Beasley, and you're the only one that weighs over 150 pounds, it's really difficult, you know, in the psyche. But I can confirm, neither in Kansas City nor in Cincinnati were cats or dogs eaten on the set. God, I can't believe I even have to acknowledge that.
I mean, this is not a political show in any way, but that
Meow.
was funny. The amount of people that sent me the Simpsons video of they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats in Springfield. Honestly, you guys might be in trouble. Anyway, let's talk about some of the football things that are going on. I want to talk a bit about national anthems. I want to talk a little bit about San Marino, but the big story, Dunny, during your television broadcasting over the last week or so was not that excellent draw against New Zealand, the result we were all hoping for. No, it was, of course, Maurizio Pochettino. The exit from Chelsea seems to have finally been agreed, and I'm sure Todd Bowley decided, shall we pay him double? That probably got it settled. So that's all done. He's out of Chelsea, and Maurizio Pochettino is the new manager of the US men's national team. You were on site, on set, when we got the confirmation of it happening. Was the mood jubilant? Is everybody happy? Are you going to win the World Cup now? Give us the latest.
Yeah, well, heading into the international date, we had heard whispers and rumors for the better part of 2.5 weeks, even Fabrizio Romano tweeting out that it was imminent. And it was about the exit between both Mauricio Pochettino and Chelsea, but also included the payoff to his staff as well, as there were multiple years remaining on his Chelsea Football Club contract. Now, it was an amicable split at the end of last season, or at least that's what we were led to believe. But I am of the soapbox belief that the moment that you decide, and I said this about the players with Raheem Sterling specifically, that this player is not in your plans, you are choosing not to use him to allow him to play for your team. Similar to Mauricio Pochettino not being allowed to coach your team, he and his staff, very Abramovich-esque is what we're seeing from Clear Lake, Blue Co., etc. Is that okay, cool. He's not your coach. Pay him off immediately. You got like 30 days in that window. Pay him and his staff off. Move on. Shake hands. Appreciate you. Hashtag till I die. And then, you know, you move on. But that wasn't the case. So the moment that the first trip to Barcelona, the second trip to Barcelona, the third, the fourth, what the agreement was in place for U.S. Soccer and Mauricio Pochettino, that framework was done. But JT Batson had to facilitate between Chelsea and Mauricio Pochettino's representatives the exit clause and what the payoff finally looked like. Because if you're Mauricio Pochettino, why don't you just sit and wait and hold on for all of your money that you put your Herbie Hancock on paper and said, okay, this is what my value is, this is what you value me, and this is what we agree upon. So at the end of the day, it finally got done. We were about to go to air. We had asked for specifics at Turner, TNT, BR Football, WBD, what are they? TBS, HBO, whatever else we are over there. But we asked for the parameters that we could announce it. So we were able to come on air. We had Ander Herrera, we had Hugo Lloris doing videos speaking to Mauricio Pochettino, and then we were able to hear from Mauricio Pochettino. We had English and Spanish. We also had Emma Hayes join the mix of sending personalized videos. And then we had Matt Crocker, sporting director of U.S. Soccer, at the desk alongside JT Batson to give us more of like the insights of the process and the reason. And I was specifically able to ask Matt Crocker straight up, you know, since I think I verbalized it somewhere in the mix of, you know, the momentum behind the 2022 World Cup in Qatar and the trajectory, what we were expecting. And then everything goes sideways, right? Ernie Stewart leaves, Brian McBride leaves, Gio Reyna situation, Claudio Reyna situation, Greg Berhalter situation, yada, yada. Very well publicized and detailed. But then when Matt Crocker comes in, to this point of announcing Mauricio Pochettino, how many managers do you think? Here's a little quick quiz for you. How many coaches do you think that this group of players have had since the end of Qatar to now the announcement of Mauricio Pochettino?
So you've got Greg coming back. You've got Novak, or whatever his name was. You've got the West Ham bloke, Tony Hudson. I have absolutely no idea the bloke who was in charge this weekend. I'm going to say Fozzie Bear. Five,
Good
six.
job. Well done. You were five. You were five. So
Oh,
five
sorry,
managers.
sorry, Tim. Sorry,
Yeah.
Tim. Yeah, sorry, Tim.
Yeah,
No,
there
no,
was
no.
a questionable sorry, Tim, in there. By the way, I think we should leave the original open in just for today, just so people can, see. Um, so my question was, okay, now you're on the fifth manager. In his time as this sporting director, what does he know now that maybe he didn't know when he decided that Greg Berhalter was the right guy? And it's a really fascinating answer, and I highly suggest kind of heading over and finding that. It was over at BR Football and Living Live, because it gives us a better insight of the process of reviewing what the World Cup was, but understanding now what this next group needs. And I think specific to these two games, which were, quite frankly, I think a waste when it was all said and done. You're missing out on 5, 6 important pieces, and specifically when you're talking about Tyler Adams, you're talking about Weston McKennie, you're talking about Gio Reyna, you're talking about Anthony Robinson, Jedi, you're talking about Tim Weah. These are all big, big pieces of the puzzle. So not to suggest that there's any reason to let these guys off the hook because there's some non-negotiables. The non-negotiables are fight, grit, determination, battling, getting stuck in, manipulating the opponent, manipulating the game. And at the end of the day, I think which was the most frustrating thing was to watch Canada perform like a team that had all of the DNA, all of the genetic makeup of what our 2010 U.S. men's national team under Bob Bradley, when Jesse Marsh was the assistant coach, looked like. You got a world class player. You've got maybe a couple of really phenomenal underneath world class players. Alfonso Davies is a world class player. I'm referencing a couple of guys that I think are phenomenal, talented players, and then just a bunch of worker bees. And I think the most telling moment for me in this window was when Christian Pulisic got filleted from behind. He's on the ground. Nobody comes and picks him up for the U.S. men's national team. No one gets in the face of a single Canadian national team player, and no one runs over to the referee and says that's unacceptable. I was sitting next to DeMarcus Beasley, 4-time World Cup veteran, inside the green room, and we're watching this, and like we're looking at each other and we're going, like, what the is happening? Sorry, Tim. Like, where is that? Where like we knew this was going to be Jesse's World Cup. No disrespect, Jesse talked all of his talk and he backed it all up. Credit to him. Canada and the direction they're going underneath Jesse Marsh looks phenomenal. But like our non-negotiables, I think we all, as viewers, of fans, of former players, of television pundits, media covers, media members, it was unrecognizable what that was. Those non-negotiables going missing during this window against these two
Why
teams,
though?
Canada and New Zealand.
Like,
Don't
why aren't they
don't know.
there? Considering they play at some of the biggest clubs in Europe, they play at some of the best clubs in America. They would have spent a lifetime to this point being involved in defending teammates, working as groups, being encouraged to do that sort of thing, backing each other up, all the very basic stuff you learn in Sunday League and beyond. So why, when that happens in this game, can it just be down to the fact that these felt like directionless, aimless games, and it was contractual obligation, we're obliged to be here, and because of
Mm.
that, there wasn't the motivation to get stuck in that way?
No, see, I was in there. Mikey Varas was the assistant coach. Yeah, Mikey. He's going to be the head coach of San Diego FC. Tom Bogert, Tommy Scoops announced that prior to this camp, and that'll be confirmed here pretty soon. I think he is an excellent coach. I think the sky's the limit for this kid. He's in his early 40s. He's coached both men and women growing up, boys and girls coming up through Northern California. Started in Sacramento Republic. He was at De Anza Force, won some national championships. Identified as a youth coach as extremely talented. Was at Sacramento Republic, went over to FC Dallas, ended up getting pulled into the first team of FC Dallas, ended up going to U.S. Soccer, coached the under 20s at the World Cup, which that group made it to the quarterfinals. They also qualified for the Olympics. He became part of Greg Berhalter's first team staff with BJ Callahan, not BJ Novak, as you said. Good Office reference. Gotcha. And then ultimately, he was under contract to stick around for the extended rest of the year after Greg was unceremoniously let go, um, and BJ Callahan took the Nashville job. Nico Estevez, who got fired at FC Dallas, is back in U.S. soccer. By the way, little nugget that I'm not sure a lot of people picked up on. Um, and I think Mikey's going to be a very good coach. But this wasn't about coaching. Like playing through a press, patterns of play, like showing some fucking balls. Sorry, Tim. Like that's these are non-negotiables. So when you ask me why, I I I think I could somewhat maybe verbalize an area, but I don't even know if that's a factual area that I'd want to step in because then I'm kind of challenging the desire of the players. Um,
Why not? Why not challenge that?
because I think we're in a really interesting phase. And I think this is more of a broad stroke of football, right? Because the generation that kind of walked into social media, right? That phase of like MySpace to Facebook to Twitter to Instagram to TikTok to all Snapchat to all of this was really the phase from like 2006-ish on. And I can remember Bob Bradley not being happy with guys like Sasha Kleshtin and Charlie Davies and Stu Holden for posting stuff on Facebook when they were like in Vegas partying. And I can remember there was like a really big pushback. Like Bob would be like, Christ, what the fuck are you guys doing? And sorry, Tim, because he was like old school. And like we're in this phase, and we do this all the time, right? Like the management of ego and the management of players, and like, are you gritty and like non-compromising like a Jose Mourinho, or are you like a Gareth Southgate, which is like a hand around the shoulder and more of like a like be communicative and understand feelings and all of that. It's a different generation. It's just flat out a different generation. So when I listen to the Marcelo Balboas or the Tony Miolas or the Alexi Lawlesses or the Clint Dempseys or the Landon Donovans, the DeMarcus Beasleys, the Michael Bradleys, the Jermaine Jones, these type of players, I it resonates with me. I understand immediately what they're it's non-compromising. Like when you would get into the national team, I can remember, and I'll go all the way back to '97. I can remember the build up to the '98 World Cup in France was an absolute disaster with Steve Sampson. I can vividly remember being in San Francisco, playing in the Gold Cup with the group of players, and it was like Brad and Casey, and Tony was in the group for a while. It was Eddie Pope. It was Greg Berhalter, who was a motherfucker as a player. Sorry, Tim. Not the presence that you see on the sideline. Who was? I mean, in the midfield, it was Harksey. You had Winalda. I mean, you had these guys that were like were murders row. And I can remember this session where Harksey kept cartwheeling me every time I get the ball. Whoop! No, I mean, literally cartwheel me, hit the ground. And I was like, "What the fuck, man?" Sorry, Tim. And he's like, "Get the fuck up, just shut the fuck up and play." Sorry, Tim. Sorry, Tim. Um, and then finally, I was like, "Stop being a dude. I'm not taking your position. I don't even play your position." Sorry, Tim. And Waldo comes over. He's like, "Yeah, Harksey, you're kind of being a." And sorry, Tim. And so then it was like all of a sudden I became like more of like the little brother where they'd look after me, less of the competitor. They kind of like, but you get in these, like you would get into these. Kyle Martino told a story about like how he went in match day -1 to a game and Dempsey like filleted, like cartwheeled him on a header, like undercut him, slammed him. Like it was uncompromising. Like the battle for positioning, the battle to play, the battle to wear the crest. And I'm not saying these guys don't have it because when you put those six guys back in that group that I mentioned earlier, the environment's different, the leadership's different, the culture's different. Like, but I I don't know, man. Like I just I look at like these little things, the style of play, the play and all of that patterns of play and all chances and all that stuff's great. But there's like a DNA. And when Christian in post game said to Melissa Ortiz, when he's inferring, fight and desire and like having Pochettino recreate that, and you could see the utter frustration in him because he's a world class player and he's looking around and saying, like, who's got effectively like who can do what I'm doing? Like who can help? Um, I think that's got to be a really tough position for Christian to be in. Because obviously he comes off the bench, immediate impact, changes the face of the game, scores the goal, has multiple opportunities. It's a fluke goal that leads to the game tying goal. At the end of the day, like it's a wash this window. You get absolutely nothing out of it outside of, I think, Marlon Fossey, um, Patrick Schulte, and Aiden Morris specifically. Those three players, I think, took a big leap forward in the player pool and what this looks like going forward. They will be noticeable, tangible, noticeable performers. Um, but there's a couple guys in that group that you're just like, really? Like that was your chance to like stamp it to make it yours. And I think it was an opportunity gone wasted in a lot of ways. But your
Final
original
question.
question, really quick,
Yeah. Go on.
I don't know because I thought those were like the basics. And I think that's what's dumbfounding everybody is like the basics of putting the crest on. And I remember saying post game, or no, I remember saying in the lead up to the game in New Zealand that like I don't like I hope these guys it should be really easy, really, really obvious. But I really hope that these guys realize that there's a couple of them. This could be the last time they're ever a part of the US men's national team.
I
Because
mean,
when Pochettino comes in, he's going to be absolutely fucking ruthless. Sorry, Tim. It's a lot
sorry,
of
Tim.
cursing. Sorry, Tim.
That was so much editing work you're giving for Tim.
To
He's a
you.
busy man. He's so busy. He's got holidays and he's got photo shoots. He's very busy. So he's now got to cut out 17 swear words in that rant. Sorry, Tim. Um, Final question on this. Before we do, though, I have some sympathy for some of these players, not the ones who maybe missed their opportunity to shine. But like, I really like my job, but I have done things through contractual obligation because they've asked you to be there and you have to
Yeah.
be there. I've done commentaries over the years where I try and give my best, but if it's a dead rubber in
Yeah.
game week 37 between Burnley and Sheffield United and they've both been relegated, I'm not going to give you the extra juice. I'm going to make sure that I'm professional and it's good. And if there's a great goal and a great game, all that. But I'm not going to spend hours writing a tortured intro to make this game have a semblance of intrigue. I'm going to say, go everyone, it's Burnley, Sheffield United. It's Saturday afternoon. It's sunny. They've both gone down. Let's get to it, shall we? Here's the teams. That's what I did. I have some
Yeah.
sympathy for anyone who was asked to play against New Zealand because there's no manager, there's no direction. Nobody wanted to really be there. There was no point in playing the game. You learned nothing from playing that opposition. And in 5 weeks' time, beyond the fact you got to see Brian Dunseth on television, a treat for all the senses. That's it. That was the only you were the only reason that game happened, so we could see you on television. That was the only reason. Final question. I want to move us on to some other bits, but Maurizio Pochettino, a manager, I've spoken to him over here. I've been at big games where he's been in charge, done loads of commentaries of Chelsea games and Tottenham games, Southampton games. Didn't watch his time in Liga, quite busy. But beyond that, I know him well as a coach, right? I think a lot of people do. Journalists do, players do. You will, our listeners will. From what you know of him, as a coach, an individual, as a person, do you think he will be able to take the US to a place where you'll be, I don't know if satisfied is the right word, happy is the right word, to a point where it's not just about the journey, it's about when you get to that World Cup, is he the person with this group of players, with his abilities, to take America to where you want them to go, where you see them being? Is this a World Cup semi-final, World Cup final pathway? Can he do it?
Yeah, the whole prediction scheme in a World Cup is out the window with the baby for me because it's just pure dumb luck. It is preparation and execution, but it's pure dumb luck when it's all said and done. So yeah, I want the US to win the World Cup. I'm old enough to remember Project 2010 when they wrote it in the 90s. Carlos Queiroz got $1 million to write the pathway for us to win the World Cup. And that was bullshit. Sorry, Tim. Um, here's what I'll say. Mauricio Pochettino from Rosario, Newell's, Argentina. His move, Espanol, PSG, uncompromising center back for the national team as well as the domestic teams, and a leader. Uh, Coaching Espanyol, getting Southampton, moving to Tottenham, consecutive, I mean, multiple top four finishes, a Champions League final where the roll of the dice could have looked different, could have been a different conversation. Managing Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe at PSG in a tumultuous time, and then coming back and taking a group of players in a moment in which no one has figured it out so far at Chelsea. And in that February, March, April, the direction of that club and where he was taking that group of players signaled to me that they were on the right path. Now, subsequently, we have a better understanding of the disaster that is behind the scenes between Bowley, Egbali, Blue Co, Clear Lake, and Class A shares, Class B shares, investment money versus personal money. Um, so that I think tells a story and probably alleviates maybe some of the pressure surrounding the exit of Pochettino from Chelsea. His four coaches, if it's anything like the three training sessions that I have seen personally when he was at Tottenham, these guys are about to walk into a cauldron of expectation. And from the moment that they arrive in camp, everything is going to be different. Because we also have to remember that this is going to be the first time Mauricio Pochettino and his staff are going to be international managers. So the amount of time, the finite amount of time, he's going to effectively. We tried to do the math with Paul Carr, who's a statistic genius. Highly suggest the follow on Twitter. Um, you're looking between 20 and 25 games is what it's going to look like before the World Cup gets here. So that's not a lot of time. And now the weight of expectation, because Emma Hayes took that group with what, 6 games and led them to an Olympic gold medal. I would suggest that the U.S. women's national team is in a much better place than what the men's are when you compare and contrast the world scale of football. But for Mauricio Pochettino and his group, he's effectively going to have maybe 3 training sessions, which would include a double day, to prepare his team for Panama in Austin at Q2 Stadium. And then to get on a plane, go down to Guadalajara and play against Mexico in Mexico against Vasco Aguirre and Rafa Marquez, his assistant coach, who smashed New Zealand and drew Canada. Um, that's going to provide its own test as well. It is going to be a cauldron on both sides. Cauldron for the players to walk into what is going to be asked of them in a short amount of time. Tim Ream, I specifically asked him, said details. Everything is going to be about details. And if you are not fully focused, you are not going to be a part of it. If you are flippant, if you are looking away, if you're not paying attention, you can't be trusted. The culture and the identity is going to be about trust. Who does number one Mauricio Pochettino and his staff think are worthy of a call in? Who then shows up? And we're talking about on the field, off the field. We're talking about eating breakfast, having lunch, eating dinner, the cultural aspect of connectivity. What does that look like? And then, like, are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introverted extrovert? Are you an extroverted introvert? Like, how do you shake hands? Do you say hello? Do you go in for the hug? Do you do the awkward, like, hand thing? Like, hey, do you acknowledge the coach before he acknowledges you? All these little data points are going to go into this. What is the human makeup of this guy? Do I trust him? Do I like him? Do I believe in him? Can I have an in the group? Sorry, Tim. Do we have the right group to deal with multiple in the group? Sorry, Tim. Like, and then you get into just being on the field, moving players around. Like, this is what I want. This is what I want. No, this is what I want. This because I heard Mikey Veras. I was at the field in Kansas City in the Canada game. Match day -1. They're just running through shapes. Mike blows the whistle. Mikey blows the whistle. What the f are we doing? Sorry, Tim. This fucking bullshit. Sorry, Tim. And he's yelling at the players. He's screaming at the players. And I was like, oh, like, okay. Like, dig it. Okay, you're going to dig into him. Didn't show at the game. So these guys, when they walk into that, they're walking into it. He is a world-class coach. He's a world-class name. Whether the trophies match the name, he's Pep or Klopp or any of this other stuff, Tuchel, that's up for debate. He won't match the statistic trophy lifts. But he's going to make everyone sit up. The moment he does his presentation, no one's going to be looking around. No one's going to be doing this. Like, yeah, dude, what about this guy? This guy? Like, what? Come on, bro. Like, there's not going to be any of that. So There's going to be a level of expectation and intensity. There's going to be a fight and grit and determination that is a non-negotiable. And the moment that you don't show what he wants, I think there's going to be a ruthlessness that this group has not seen. It's going to be an uncompromising ruthlessness that I hope they're ready for, because I think we're all excited to see, you know, the momentum coming off the 2020 World Cup. And this is what's the most frustrating, is we thought there was going to be an escalation. And we saw him win the Nations League. We saw him go through this havoc of not understanding who the manager was going to be. And that whole thing threw a wrinkle in it that none of us could have ever projected.
Yeah.
That at the end of 22 World Cup, that this was going to lead to Mauricio Pochettino, 18 months later, almost 2 years later. So here we are. Buckle up, hold on tight. I think it's a great appointment. And I think it works for both sides, because he's not going to want to fail. This is a move that you cannot fail, leading this group into the World Cup, hosting a hosting nation in the World Cup, and understanding that we do tournaments big. The 2026 World Cup is going to be a massive, massive tournament, and it can't look anything like what we saw the failure at Copa America.
Just hope he sings the anthem, otherwise everyone's in trouble. Listen, I want to move us on to some other stories in a few moments' time. Before we do some housekeeping for today, if you're watching the program on YouTube, did you know it's also a podcast available on all good podcast platforms? And if you're listening as a podcast, you can watch the program in its entirety on YouTube. So click the subscribe button. And also, if you go around a friend's house, you go to a party, say, and they're like, oh, I don't really do music, but I've got some songs on YouTube or whatever. Search for Week in the Tackle at a friend's house and subscribe on their behalf. Then we'll start coming up in the algorithm. And, you know, it's a great show, so they're not going to regret it unless they don't care about Mauricio Pochettino, in which case
We're huge in Malaysia.
they might care this week. And also, yes, thank you for mentioning that. Top 4 in Malaysia this week. I don't know why, but we thank you, the listeners of Malaysia, for putting us in the top 4. We thank our listeners in America for putting us in the top 40. We thank our listeners all over the world. And we want your reviews as well. I think because we get more reviews, because we're doing some housekeeping, we're getting higher up in the search list. So I'll just mention a couple from this week. Gareth, is MV a state? Is that a place?
Nevada.
MV, like for mother. Minneapolis? Is that a thing? No?
Northern Virginia?
Northern Virginia, where they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Anyway, Gareth says, always enjoy the interplay between Rennie and Dunny. Knowledgeable and hilarious. Couldn't give you 5 stars, though, because of a thing Dunny does.
Oh.
I'm a suffering Spurs supporter, and I can't let Dunny's derisive/mocking pronunciation of Tottenham pass. Now, some pushback, and he says, what is that supposed to be anyway? So you cost us a 5-star fucking review there, Dunny. Sorry, Tim, with your nonsense. Also like this from the expertly named Lagerhead O'Toole. He's eating the dogs. He's eating the cats. Lagerhead O'Toole says, if you like the phrase at the end of the day, this is the podcast for you. That's a 5-star review. But there you go. It's good. That was for you. 2 full Dunny reviews there. So do leave us a written review if you can, and give us a 5-star review, even if the way Dunny says Tottenham pisses you off. Listen, I thought, because we've got a few little tidbitty stories, and we haven't really got heroes and villains from the last international break, I thought we could just do 1 or 2 stories here, Dunny, and just kind of see what we think about them. And the first one I wanted to do was the national anthem thing, which was a big story over here last week. And of course, you may have that issue coming up with Mauricio Pochettino being, you know, Argentinian and being the US men's national team manager. Is he going to sing the Star Spangled Banner? Maybe he will, because you have kind of a cool anthem, whereas we have a kind of funereal dirge, which pays tribute to a ridiculous concept. God save our gracious, just appalling. And also, just a sidebar, the anthem, God Save the King. Can we just do a count in, right? So if you go to a show where the singing starts immediately, the drummer will usually go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they start singing. And the reason they do that is so the band, who practice together pretty much every day for hours on end, come in at the same time. You ain't going to get 20 to 80,000 people coming in at the same time if you have a drum roll of what seems like miscellaneous length. It then disappears to nothing, and then it's God. Because every time And I have been in so many stadiums, also seen it on TV, different countries. It's like, God, 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 God. No one knows where God is. Never a truer phrase spoken. So let's just add a little drum beat into the start of God Save the King, just for everyone. 1, 2, 3, 4. God save our gracious King. I don't know why I did it all poppy, but let's add the drum beat. The other element to this is that there's a lot of real bonehead right-wing journalism out there, right? It's a big thing. Lee Carsley is currently the England manager, and he played for Ireland. He has Irish heritage. And there was a whole thing about Lee Carsley not singing the national anthem in fucking Dublin. Sorry, Tim. Whilst England manager against Ireland. Now, I didn't think this would be a big story because, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe I haven't got the time in this podcast. I'm not sure people will be that interested for me to do it, to tell you about the long-standing issues there are between England and Ireland. But it's been going on for a while, and a lot of grievances are extremely legitimate, certainly against England. And so maybe he just thought, you know what? Just to be respectful and to not get involved in this nonsense, as someone who's played for Ireland in this stadium, I'm just not going to sing it. I'll just be quiet and we'll get through it. And some players don't sing the anthem anyway. We had a Swedish manager for 6 years, an Italian manager for 3 years. I wouldn't expect them to sing God Save the King. But it became this whole, well, they should sack him. He's got to be sacked, this guy, for not singing the anthem. Who does he think he is? And it's a bit like, well, Declan Rice didn't celebrate scoring the goal he scored. And he said, well, my grandparents were Irish and they're not with us now. And to be honest, I would have felt like I was, I don't know, winding them up and being horrible to my own grandparents if I scored the goal. These just seem like mature and sensible and respectful things to do. And I don't think it denigrates the very concept of a nation of England. And yet over here, it's been a massive story. Give us your view, Dunny, from kind of the outside looking in at this stupid basket case country. Should this have been just a big story, or is this a storm in a right-wing teacup?
Well, we had kind of the opposite because Jesse Marsh was singing "Oh Canada" at full blast, and he's an American singing the Canadian anthem against the United States, like in the stadium. So, yeah, listen, at the end of the day, I just don't get wound up about stuff like this. I can remember when the national anthem would sing, I'd have my hand off of my heart because my heart would start pounding if I had my hand on my heart for some reason. So I'd always keep my hand just off my heart. And I'd listen to the national anthem and I'd maybe like start to voice it, but I wasn't like belting it out. I think what it is because, you watch like say Argentina or you watch Uruguay or some of the countries and they're like belting it full blast. And you're like, oh, that's, this is extraordinary, right? This is amazing. This is, you can feel the energy and the self-belief coming out of this group right now. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I saw the fury and the uproar. If England FA had a problem with it, they probably wouldn't have put him in charge for these games, knowing full well that this could be the outcome. And they probably already knew that he wasn't going to sing the national anthem because he was head coach of the 21s. So I don't think there's anything different that he's done. It's just on a bigger scale. And obviously he wants to show respect for the country that he actually played for. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Should it stop you getting the job if that happens? Should if we turn it back to the US Canada example, should Jesse no longer be able to be the US manager because he sung "Oh Canada"?
No, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, he's employed by the country. He's trying to motivate the players. It's his bag. Jesse's more of a front facing person anyways from the media side. So I think this was him ingratiating himself with the Canadian public first and foremost. I mean, he had 35 days with them between the friendlies against Holland and France and then leading into Copa America. Um, he can be a derisive figure at times, but I think also he's a guy that in Canada is doing a lot of like lower level coaching and getting his hands in the mix over in Canada. So he's going to be a generational figurehead for them for a long, long time. I don't have a problem with anything that he's doing because at the end of the day, he's right. He was overlooked in the process by Matt Crocker, who elected to go with Greg Berhalter, and he said on multiple occasions that this group of players, he's having more fun working with this group of players than he could imagine working with the players that are available for the US right now.
When you said that there, I imagine that Jesse Marr spent time with the entirety of Canada. Like he just found time for everyone, went around everyone's house and like made them some sort of pie.
Yeah,
Took
can see
maple
it.
syrup off them. I can envisage it. Him going to every Tim Hortons in the country. I can see it. The only other thing about this, I want to move us on, but is that you know that famous meme of the worst person in the world you know has just made a good point. The issue with this for me is that I don't really go in for kind of xenophobia and whatnot. It seems like a waste of time. But I do think that essentially this is passport v passport. That's what international football is. Not everyone agrees with me, but that's what I think. And I think the manager should be of the same country as the players. Otherwise, kind of what are we doing? I don't really get it. And so I did find myself agreeing with these tossers, but not for the same reason. You know? So I do think the manager should be English and sing the anthem, but in the very specific real world example, I obviously don't have a problem with it because it seemed like the right thing to do. But it wouldn't be a problem if we only hired someone that was like, I'm going to say full blood English, even though that's not what I mean. But, like someone who's only ever been out with girls from Dagenham and his parents worked on the food plant in Dagenham, yada, yada, yada. So it wouldn't happen if they followed what I said. But
Yeah,
then I was in league with like the morons and bigots and whatnot, which I don't
bold
want to do.
strategy. Bold strategy.
Let's see if it pays off. My only other thing from the international break I wanted to mention was San Marino. I love the story of San Marino, who England seemed to play in every qualification run, literally since the dawn of time. They beat Liechtenstein by 1-0 in a Nations League fourth-tier encounter. It was their first ever competitive victory, and their first victory in 34 years. The last time they won a game was against Liechtenstein, but it wasn't a qualifier or whatnot. It didn't go down as a competitive victory, so I'm told. I'm not doing the research on that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because of a fan account, San Marino _FA. It's the San Marino fan account. If you're not following San Marino fan account, you should do so, because if Twitter still exists, if it's not been burned to the ground by the billionaire guy who sends other billionaires up to space to waddle about at the very top of the ship for a few minutes and go back in. I did watch it today. Yeah, it was weird. But if it's still going in 20 years, this will be a worthwhile follow, because that's when they'll win again. So the San Marino fan account tweeted before the game, back to the last time we faced Liechtenstein, we drew, but actually deserved to win. Will we get our revenge tonight? 8 hours to go. Then it's a pretty standard sort of live blog of the game on Twitter until we get slightly further down. For example, sorry, Tim. Nani with a shot on the post, all caps, but it was offside anyways. Come on, you lads. Forza Titana. It goes on and on and on. F this, man. This is some utter bull S. Sorry, Tim, I'm trying to help you now. Lots to cut out in this programme. But then they score a goal. So here are the tweets after they score a goal in this game. I'll just read them in chronological order. Not all of them, but some. And I want you to bear in mind, I'm doing it this way because they're all in caps. Oh my God, it's happening. It's happening. Oh my God, it's happening. Oh my God. We took the lead against Liechtenstein in the 52nd minute. Sensely scored a goal. Sensely scored a freaking goal. Sensely, you absolute legend. It goes on. This is going to be the longest 30 minutes of our lives. Praying to the football gods right now. Next, San Marino really want to win this game. Next, 10 minutes remain. It's actually happening. This ain't a dream. Please don't bottle it, lads. Next. We're celebrating getting a free kick. What passion. My man. 5 minutes to go. Next. It's happening. It's actually happening, folks. Next. 3 minutes to go. Come on, lads. Come on, San Marino. Next. Only 1 minute until San Marino. Write history. 1 fucking minute. Sorry, Tim. Next. San Marino won. That's the tweet. Next. They wrote history. They'll be remembered forever as legends, as the golden generation of San Marinese football. They did something we couldn't do in 20 years. 140 games in 12,600 minutes of football. A win. A fucking win. Sorry, Tim. Next. They did it. The first ever competitive win. No one can take that away from San Marino. Today, San Marino wrote football history. Thank you, Sensoli. Thank you, San Marino. Forza Titani. Next, Nico Sensoli. 4 matches, 1 win, and the most important goal scored in the last 20 years. Remember his name, Nico Sensoli. We love you. Next, Nico Sensoli. Your defense is terrified. La 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 la. Next, Nico Sensoli wasn't even born when San Marino won their first match in 2004. Just incredible. Well done to that person having a nervous breakdown, I assume in stadium, on their phone, live blogging the game. I feel like I lived it and I loved it.
What if I was just thinking about what if he was sitting like in his parents' basement and just on his like little laptop doing this because he's like, I'm not going to this game. That they're not gonna win again. Sorry, Tim. But I could see. I felt like I was in his brain, like all the way through that. But yeah, congrats, incredible.
Good story. Any heroes, villains, tidbits from you in the last few days?
Yeah, I would say the only villain for me this week is going to be the challenge for Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And I know it sounds a weird one because they're hosting the World Cup. That means they're going to avoid World Cup qualifying and all the travails that comes along with it. But for those three countries in particular, this is going to be interesting to see. We just talked about the window. Heading into the Copa America, Canada was able to book Holland and France over in Europe. The United States were able to book Colombia and Brazil before Copa America. They just played each other, obviously. And then Canada gets to play Mexico in their second game. US gets New Zealand. Uh, Mexico played New Zealand. Now, this next group, US will play Panama, and then they'll play Mexico in Mexico. The challenges now for Mauricio Pochettino are going to be really difficult for him to get on the phone and sway the public opinion of other FAs to play the United States, whether home or on the road. And I can remember sitting with somebody and saying, I would love to see the US go down to Uruguay. I would love to see this group of players go to Colombia. I'd love to see them go to Argentina and deal with the elements. Because I think this team is more of a European team than a South American team, to be quite honest with you. And I remember someone said to me, influential at the time, because we're hosting the World Cup in the United States, and took a sip of water. I was like, okay, sorry, Tim. That's not what I mean. It means from a development standpoint. So just acknowledging that the challenge for these three FAs are going to be pretty extraordinary and trying to figure out. And one of the things that I heard that might be interesting is I wonder how many national teams like England or sorry, US, Canada, and Mexico start scheduling friendlies with domestic teams instead of like saying, oh, we're going to play El Salvador. Can we play Real Madrid? Can we play Barcelona? Can we do like one of these showcases? It won't look as pure and nationalistic as we expect during an international window, but just wondering, and I don't know what the trickle down effect would be for releasing players because you would think in an international window it'd have to be an international game, and that wouldn't qualify as an international game. But just wondering what this looks like because you got to get the highest level quality games because you're not going to get a lot out of understanding a 5-0 win against Oman, Uzbekistan, or against New Zealand.
Yeah. Going to be interesting to see. And hopefully it is like Oman and Uzbekistan because I assume they'll send you to broadcast it. And, that sounds fun. I'd love
Yeah.
to see you in Uzbekistan. That'd be good.
Yeah, I'd go.
Yeah. Can we come? Can me and Tim come? Are we
Yeah.
allowed to swear in Uzbekistan? I don't know.
Probably not.
Live from Uzbekistan, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast from our prison cells. Where are you this week? Where are you going? Where will you be commentating?
So I'll be Sunday. I'll be the standalone game, Seattle Sounders against Sporting Kansas City with my man Max Bretos. JP Navarro, Marcelo Balboa will be on the Spanish side. And yeah, it'll be an afternoon kick up in Seattle. Cannot wait. It's going to be gorgeous.
I've got two good ones this weekend. I'll be doing Aston Villa Everton on Saturday.
Ooh.
And our good friend Trevor Stephen, the title winner with Everton, back with us on Premier League Live the weekend. So in America, it's on Sirius XM FC, but around the world, check your local listings. It could be on the TalkSport website if we don't have a partner in your region. So yeah, check your listings there. Then on Sunday, I am going to the North London Derby. Yeah, I'm going to be there on Sunday watching the game, enjoying the game. I'll try and record something for our
What kind
podcast.
of ticket did you get? What kind of ticket?
You know what kind of ticket I got. Come on, buddy. Wait,
Tell
come
him.
on.
Tell
Called a
him.
guy, called a guy. And I'm going to
Okay.
be having free sandwiches while I'm there. But also in exciting news, I won't tell you all of this on air. I might tell you some of it off air. After the game, North London Derby, I'm going to meet one of Ray Hudson's ex-wives. She texted me, got the number off Ray, honest, and said, hi, I don't know if her name is public, so I won't mention it, but she said, my name may ring a bell as Ray Hudson's introduced me to you. I'm his most recent Greek ex. And she's going the game and was like, do you want to meet me afterwards? And I was like, yeah, of course. If Ray recommends you, I'll come and say hello. Of course I will. It sounds fun.
Okay.
So next week, I'll let you know what she had to say about being, I assume, married or at least together with Ray Hudson at some point in her life.
Are you? So do you bring it up or does she bring it up?
It's my first question.
Yeah. So how did it end?
How did it start? How did it end? And tell me 3 funny stories about going out to dinner with Ray Hudson.
Amazing.
Can imagine it now. Anyway, that's the story of it. We'll tell you all about it next week. This has been the Week in the Tackle podcast. That's Brian Dunseth. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program. We'll see you next week.